I also have a 1 o'clock meeting. Will we be longer than 1 o'clock?
No, it's 15 minutes. All right, so we are live now. So thank you so much for joining us for another Technical Tuesday. I'm joined by Beverly Bardaquez from the Rapp Road Historical Association. I know a couple weeks ago we had talked a little bit about Rapp Road, but I figured I can talk, but why not bring the experts in to share a little bit with you? So Beverly's a part of the Rapp Road Historical Association and a longtime resident of Rapp Road. So thank you so much for joining us, Beverly. Would you like to share with us just a little bit about the history and the wonderful story of Rapp Road?
Sure. Thank you for inviting me to talk about our wonderful community here. It's just a remnant now of what it used to be. We once covered 28 acres here in the Pine Bush, and now we're down to about 14 acres. But there's still a piece of our history here that we're holding on dearly to. I am third generation in the Rapp Road community. My grandparents migrated here during the Great Migration in 1939. They came to Albany, New York, to the South End from Hattiesburg, Mississippi. They were from Shibuda, Mississippi, where most of the people that settled in the Rapp Road community came from. But because of work took my grandparents to Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And they boarded a Greyhound bus and came to Albany, New York. My mother was about 12 years old, and she had 3 siblings under her. And there was my grandparents, Alfred and Leola Woodard. There was my great-grandparents, Sam and Nora McCann. And then there were a couple of other cousins that my great-grandmother raised that came along. And my mom said, she remembers watching the telephone poles as they went by on a Greyhound bus headed to Albany. And she said, when they finally arrived in Albany, she said it just was so foreign to her. And they had made arrangements to live with an uncle and his family on Duncan Avenue when they arrived until they could get here and get settled. The minister that purchased the land out here, there were 2. There was Lewis Parson and William Tolliver. And the 2 of them pooled their resources and bought the first 14 acres of land in 1930, May of 1930. And they then started parceling out the land to Lewis's parishioners and his church. 3 years later, Lewis and his wife, Frances, bought another 14 acres. And that's where you come to get a total of 28 acres of land. And in 1940, Lewis passed away. But Frances, continued to parcel out the land to church parishioners. And she eventually remarried to William Wilborn. And together, they continued to kind of oversee the community as it grew. There were, in the past, there were 23 families that lived here in the Rapp Road Historic District. The people lived all the way from Western Avenue, all the way, if you were to go up to Washington Avenue Extension and connect with the Northern Rapp Road that turns into Lincoln Avenue. That was all part of Rapp Road. Rapp Road was one continuous road that wrapped around to Lincoln Avenue. And we had people that lived on that side of the road. In 1970 or 71, when the Washington Avenue extension was built, it split our community in half. And when it split our community in half, the people that lived on the opposite side of the road had the option of either selling their homes to the state or moving their homes closer to the residents that are currently living on Rapp Road. There was only one home that was moved. The rest sold their property to the state. So right now there are about 13 homes here, and of the original homes. And most of them are still the original buildings. Some of them have been rehabbed. Some of them are in great need of repair. And my hope is that somehow, some way, we're going to get help to refurbish some of these homes that I very much want to try to save. There are about 4 of them that need to be saved. And some of them have been sold. They're still individually owned by, the owners are individually owned. There are, I think, about 5 of us from the original settlers here that live in the homes on Rapp Road. Other homes have been sold to other individuals. But there remains about 5 families that are still part of the original community. Rapp Road is very unique in the fact that it was nothing but a little dirt lane with lots of pine trees and woods. There was not a lot of, it was not developed at all. And it was owned by a farmer by the name of Charles Smith. He is the one that sold the 28 acres to William Welborn and William Tolliver. I'm sorry, to Lewis Parson and William Tolliver. And when he sold them the land, it was totally undeveloped. So they literally had to clear the land so that they could start working the land. And because they were tenant farmers and sharecroppers from Shibuda, farming was all they knew. So they cleared the land, they got livestock, and they started farming the land and gardening. When I was a little girl, there were gardens up and down Rapp Road as far as the eye could see. There were cornfields, there were fields with all kinds of good vegetables. As a child, we would go out and play, and rather than coming in at lunchtime for lunch, we would go into the garden and get cucumbers and tomatoes, and occasionally sneak across the road to my uncle's garden, who had great watermelons. And we just had a lot of fun. I often tell people, as a child, I thought of Rapp Road as summer camp. It was like being at summer camp. We could play from dawn to midnight, and nobody worried about us because they knew we were okay. And the community was a community that you were everybody's child. If you were misbehaving and someone saw you doing something you shouldn't be doing, you could get in trouble with them just like you could your own parents. And then you had to go home and deal with your own parents as well. So it was a very tightly knit community. The thing that I think helped this community thrive the way it did was because the people worked together. Most of them were all parishioners of the First Church of God in Christ. And that was kind of the nucleus of the community. Church was a very integral part of their lives. And they would go to church on Sundays all day. They had church services on Tuesday. I remember going to choir rehearsal with my aunties, who were little girls at the time, on Wednesdays. And church was very important. I had a cousin tell me just yesterday, who was 80 years old. The older children, when they went to high school, they did not want the children that they went to school with to know that they lived on Rapp Road, because they were referred to as the children from the country, and they didn't want to be identified as children from the country. And me, on the other hand, I loved telling people I go to the country, I live in the country. But it was like, to them it was like, we don't want.
Oh, I think we lost you there, Bev. Your microphone just got muted. Let's see if we can unmute that.
To tell people that we always have had that close community. And what I was saying before about the close knitness of the community, if someone came to the community and they were building a house, you didn't go to the bank and get a mortgage. You had to dig your own foundation, and it was by hand, and then start building your home. And a lot of times they lived in the foundation until they could afford materials to start building the home. And the people that lived in the community already would come and help them dig the foundation, lay the blocks, and get them started. And then if they needed help, once they started building their home, they would often, if somebody, let's say, was a mason, I had a cousin that was an excellent mason. I had an uncle that was an excellent carpenter. Whatever skills they had, they would lend to that individual to help them build the house. These little, I call them little bungalows. If you were to drive down through here, you would not give them the second thought. But knowing the history and how they came to be here is what makes them so special and so unique. And I think that, because we are the only community, as far as I know, in New York State that came here during the Great Migration and carved out a community. A lot of people came and settled, but they settled in cities where they could get work. They didn't necessarily, have to build their own community. The community was already there. So the fact that these individuals came here and cultivated this land and developed this land and built these homes, it makes it very unique history that came as a result of the Great Migration. I'd always like to tell the story about the children, going back to the children, uh, going to school in the Albany School District. The school district would not provide transportation for them in terms of coming into Rapp Road because it was such a small dirt road. You could only get one car down the road at a time. And so the children would have to walk out to Western Avenue. When they walked out to Western Avenue, the bus would pick them up there. So that being the case, the church, again, which I said was the nucleus of the community, purchased a school bus, and they decided they were going to bus their own children to school. The problem was they could get the bus down in here to Rapp Road by Springsteen Road, but they couldn't turn the bus around to get it back out to Western Avenue. So again, some of the men in the community, my uncles, my grandfather, cousins, and other church family members took and widened the road at Springsteen so that the bus would have somewhere to turn around so that the children could get the school bus to school without walking out to Western Avenue. The problem they had was who was going to drive the school bus. And so, that had to be resolved. My grandmother, who I think could do anything that she put her mind to, she said, "I'll drive the kids to school and back." So I very proudly tell people, I believe my grandmother was probably the first Black female bus driver in Albany, because she drove that school bus to get the kids to school and back. But they were very resourceful people. They weren't real educated academically, but they had good common sense, and they were resourceful, and they knew how to get things done, and they did it together. And I think that's what made the community thrive, and survive for all these years. It's like I said, we're a remnant now, and it makes me kind of sad because I remember what it was like at one time. And things change, people change, and that's okay. But I really just miss being able to run up and down the road, and it was just a bumpy dirt road. Anybody would try to come down that road now, they wouldn't have a car by the time they left, because it was just that bad. Ruts in the road, everything. But the community was awesome, and we loved playing out here amongst that. We would go through the woods and go berry picking. There were all kinds of crab apple trees, and we would go and pick berries and crab apples and bring them back to my grandmother, and my grandmother would make apple jelly preserves. And on a nice cold winter morning, it was nothing for us to wake up and have hot warm biscuits with crab apple jelly on it. And those were the kinds of things I remember growing up with. We had all kinds of activities that we did here. One of them being our family reunion. We had a family reunion that we should have celebrated this past weekend. It would have been our 63rd reunion. And because of COVID, we had to postpone it. But how we come to start that family reunion was we had a cousin who lived in Buffalo, and that cousin had come to visit, and he was getting ready to go back home to Buffalo, and family members decided they wanted to get together and have a cookout to send him off back to Buffalo. And that's how our family reunion got started. And so we have been able to maintain that tradition, like I said, for the past 62 years. This was the first year we were unable to do it. But if God be willing, we plan to do it again next year, bigger and better. And there's a cookhouse. And a lot of people are curious about what that little building is. It sits right on the corner of Rapp Road and Springsteen. And that cookhouse is where they roasted a pig for the family reunion, sometimes two pigs. And they started out with just a pit in the ground. But then, if the weather was inclement and it wasn't cooperative, they decided to build that little building so that they could roast the pig and have the pig for family reunion. And that became a tradition. The men all hung out at that cookhouse for a couple of days cooking the pig. The women were busy cooking vegetables, making salads, doing, things to prepare for this reunion. And we had a big black colander, a big pot, huge, that they would build a fire under. And they would get bags of corn and throw the corn with the husk on and everything over in that colander. And that was the best corn. I don't know what it was about that corn being cooked in that pot, but it was the best corn. And everybody, children, babies, grown-ups, loved the corn and still love the corn. I think we had a lot of our family members on Facebook this past weekend sharing pictures and memories of what they remember about family reunion. And the corn was one of the things that everybody was missing, So we have a rich history here. And it's a lot of people, when they drive through here, because this has become a thoroughfare for many people, and they have no clue of the history of how this road come to be here. So it's our job as the historical association to make that history known and keep the legacy alive and keep our heritage alive that our family members and neighbors started so many years ago. And I welcome anybody that is interested to come and just take a ride and look at the homes. They're not palatial. They're very humble little homes, but so much went into building those homes and so much went into preserving and keeping those homes. And were it not for uh, economic development and Washington Avenue Extension, it would probably still be a lot more homes here than what's here now. But I invite anyone to come along and see what remains of our community.
Thank you so much, Bev, for sharing all this. Unfortunately, I think we need to wrap up a little bit, but perhaps we'll do a little bit more programming. We can share a lot more stories because this is really wonderful. So thank you so much for
You're
all
so
that you
welcome.
shared with us today. This is fabulous, and we definitely need to talk more. Is the Rapp Road Historical Association doing any tours? I know COVID, a lot of stuff has been postponed, but are you guys doing any in-person tours at any point soon?
I have not been doing any tours. But that's not to say that, if someone were interested, um, they would have to drive. So I don't know if social distancing would permit that or not.
Maybe next
Um,
year might be a little bit
yeah,
better.
yeah. I think, right now, I just don't feel comfortable, um, walking the road and yeah, but we definitely want to uh, continue with the tours and have people see what's going on. Right now, we're working on a project where we're trying to make application to HALS
Ooh, that'll be fabulous.
to be placed on the National Historic Parks.
Yeah,
And
Historic American Landscape
mhm,
Survey. So similar
mhm.
to HABS, the Historic American Building Survey, which was a big WPA thing, HALS
Yes,
landscapes. So
yes,
well, that's really
yes.
wonderful. Well, thank you again so much, Beverly. This was
Mhm.
absolutely wonderful. I'm going to sign off for now. So thank you everyone so much for joining us, and we'll see you hopefully next week for Technical Tuesday. Thank you.